let us, with God's help, continually surrender these hobbling demands. Then we can be set free to live and love. We may then be able to 12th step ourselves and others into emotional sobriety.
Thank you, Diane. And you've been here before. You know the question. What
Yes.
resonated with you as you read that tonight?
Well, I guess a lot of my, disappointments about things happening in life actually stem from my what he calls my perfectionistic dreams and specifications. Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of really life itself. It's just that I have these hobbling demands that really interfere with my ability to keep a healthy perspective. That would be it.
Yeah, I think we can all agree with that. It's my laundry list of, shoulds of how things are supposed to be in order for me to be okay, right? And
Yeah.
I love the word hobbling. You call that out. It means like it's like my feet got knocked out from underneath me. I'm limping along as a result of them, right?
Exactly. The consequence of that kind of thinking. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dan. I really appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Okay, so as advertised this evening, Alan is away, so the mice shall play. Roger Andes has been so gracious enough to join us and lead our discussion. We're continuing on step 10 in emotional sobriety, so I'm just going to turn over the floor to Roger and join back in later. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. I'm spotlighted now, so I can't see your faces, but it was good to see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces as well. I got a text from Alan yesterday morning saying that he had a flight that was changed and pushed back, and he was not going to be able to come to the meeting tonight. So he asked me if I would fill in. And I'm glad to do that for tonight, for this week. He also said that the subject for tonight was step 10, and in particular, the relationship between step 10 and emotional sobriety and self-esteem. A little side note, if I've already seen some really nice messages in the chat to me. Thank you very much. And there's another. Thanks so much, you guys. So I might not see messages in the chat, some of them, because I'm going to be obviously focused on speaking and then listening to Tom and Tom later. But Tom is going to post my email address in the chat. If you had a question about the presentation or you wanted to let me know something, you can feel free to email me if you wish. So step 10. Continued to take personal inventory when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Again, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. In the 12 and 12, Bill Wilson makes several points about what he means by personal inventory and so on. He talks about learning to do spot checks at numerous times during the day when we feel like our behavior has been less than stellar, okay, where it's fallen short of being as emotionally sober as we would like to be. And he also talks about the importance of acknowledging wrongdoing, he calls it. I would prefer the word mistakes because, again, I am trying to take a perspective of emotional sobriety and self-esteem work on step 10 for tonight. But he also talks about the importance of promptly admitting wrongdoing, right? Promptly admitting our mistakes that are harmful to other people. And the beginning to do this, beginning to take these inventories on a daily basis, is what can help our spiritual and psychological growth go forward in emotional sobriety. I want to point out, as Tom Rutledge often does, that it's practice, practice, practice is the deepest and best formula for how to create change in our life. I'll be talking about some other ways to help us do it, but in having a daily devotion to this inventory, we are doing exactly that. We are putting into practice the principles that Bill talks about throughout the 12 and 12. Some of the questions he thinks that are important to ask that he talks about: can we stay sober and keep emotional balance and live to good purpose under all conditions? Which obviously gels with what was just read about excessive emotional dependency being at the core of many of our disturbances, many of our problems. He also says these inventories gradually reduce the frequency of emotional hangovers, his words, from yesterday's and today's excesses of negative emotion, from anger, from fear, jealousy, and the like. He emphasizes that it's important to also include what was done right during the day, not just things we wish we had done differently. He then goes on to say our first objective will be the development of self-restraint in terms of dealing with our character defects, or as we've said before, character defaults. For we can neither think nor act to good purpose until the habit of self-restraint has become automatic. Self-restraint regarding emotional excess, both positive, exuberance, euphoria, and so on, as well as negative. We begin to see that all people, including ourselves, are to some extent emotionally ill. I think of it more in terms of emotionally injured or wounded, as well as frequently wrong. And then we approach true tolerance and see what real love for our fellows actually means. As these inventories are done, and we begin to see that all of us are wounded going through life. So, how do we develop this quality of self-restraint? Well, for me, it's a complicated issue. To start with, I like to think in terms of balance regarding many issues in emotional sobriety and with self-esteem and with life. Many of us have great difficulty managing or regulating or containing, you choose whatever word fits best for you, our emotional reactions to people and to situations. But that's not the primary problem for all of us, right? Some of us overregulate our emotions to such an extent that we're emotionally numb, we're cut off, and have difficulty connecting to our own feelings or empathizing with the feelings of other people. So the first step for you is to be aware of your relationship to your own feelings. As a unique individual, what is your tendency or pattern between underregulation of your emotional experience and expression, overregulation of it, or a healthy fluid balance between expression and containment, depending on where you're at emotionally, depending on the situation, and so on. And of course, the issue is not black and white. For each one of us, there might be certain feelings depending on what the emotional expression rules were in our family growing up, by which I mean which feelings were okay to show and which feelings were not okay to show, as well as the rules in our culture about which feelings are okay to show and not to show. So for each of us as individuals, we might have a greater range and freedom with regard to certain feelings than we have with other feelings. So that's not black and white, even for us as individuals. But step 10 is focused on learning to better self-regulate, right? Learning better self-restraint. So that's where my focus will be tonight. I want to point out, and it's really important to point out, that whatever relationship we've learned to have toward our emotional experience, we learned that relationship. We've come by our patterns of emotional inhibition or emotional expression honestly as efforts to cope with life, with our environment as children, efforts to gain what love and approval we could in our families and at school and so on, efforts to avoid punishment and rejection. Whatever your typical style, whether your typical style is strong emotional suppression or intense emotional expression, you can learn through changing outdated beliefs, learning about your typical coping strategies, and learning new possibilities. You can learn to change those patterns and to develop better emotional sobriety. The ideal, from my perspective, is we develop the flexibility to contain our emotional expression when we want to do that, when we think that's going to serve us best, or to openly be able to express, whether it's so-called positive feelings, excitement, happiness, joy, love, or so-called negative feelings, anger, fear, sadness, grief, is to be able to express or contain feelings as we want to, depending on the situation and the moment. So, in terms of helping learn emotional self control, emotional self restraint, there are a few strategies and ideas I want to mention to everyone. The foundation of this, in terms of tonight's discussion, is step 10, beginning to pay on a daily basis, a number of times daily, pay attention to what our behavior and our experience is with regard to our emotions and the impact of that behavior on those around us, as well as on ourselves. So the first thing I ask my clients to look at when we're looking at the issue of emotional expression and containment is to ask yourself, what's my motivation to try to develop greater emotional expression or containment, whichever I feel like I want to move in the direction of, to develop greater emotional sobriety? And that can vary for each one of us. But it's very important to think about that. Why would I want to do this? Why do I want to go to the trouble and the energy to keep track on a daily basis of an emotional inventory? And then at the end of the day, at night, to look back over the day and do kind of an end of day inventory. It's like, how is that going to benefit me? That's a question I think is really important for each one of us to answer for ourselves. Why does this matter to me? Right? And how would it benefit myself and others to develop greater emotional sobriety? For me, a principle that's helped me a lot in recent years with developing better emotional sobriety, I'm far from perfect, of course, as I think we all are, is a commitment to kindness or compassion toward myself and toward others. Even if I'm angry with somebody, even if I'm blaming someone for hurting me and, quote, wanting to hurt them back, even if I'm disappointed, I can still learn, and I have learned a lot over the years, to express what I'm feeling little by little, situation by situation, and person by person. I can learn to express those feelings constructively and in a kind way, in a way that I would want the other person to express those feelings to me if our roles were reversed. And this is very important. The kindness I'm talking about includes kindness toward ourselves and not just toward others. Kindness toward ourselves and not just toward others. In this chapter, in the 12 and 12, Bill Wilson references this, writing about step 10. We can try to stop making unreasonable demands upon those we love. And who among us does not do that, right? I believe to some extent we all do. Without even awareness, we're doing so much of the time. We can show kindness where we had shown none. With those we dislike, we can begin to practice justice and courtesy, perhaps going out of our way to understand and to help them. Whenever we fail any of these people, we can promptly admit it to ourselves always, and to them also, when the admission can be helpful. Courtesy, kindness, justice, and love are the keynotes by which we may come into harmony with practically anybody. Courtesy, kindness, justice, and love. Powerful words, right? Important words, but the challenge for all of us is, okay, if I decide for myself, I want more of those emotional qualities in my life, in my behavior, and in my relationships, how do I bring them into my life more? And specifically, I'm going to slant that toward what tools can I use to help me, to help me develop the containment and restraint that I want. And one of them, as I mentioned, is to remind ourselves several times a day of our commitment to emotional sobriety. As Alan has said, our commitment to letting the best in us lead the rest of us. The best in us lead the rest of us in our lives. There can be a lot of other powerful motivations for wanting to grow in our emotional sobriety. To reduce the pain that my current patterns are inflicting on other people and on myself is a huge motivation for me, and I think for most of us. If you look deeply enough, the pain that we're in is often the most powerful motivation for psychological and spiritual growth. And that's certainly true with regard to emotional sobriety as well. Another motivation can be to increase my level of self-esteem and self-respect. Another one is to experience greater peace and serenity in my life, to learn to value myself more as I am. Another one might be to help someone I care about feel more understood and loved by me. We can help figure out what our motivation is, and we can remind ourselves as we go through our day why we want to pay more attention to our level of emotional sobriety and why we want to devote energy to cultivating that. We can make our motivations real to ourselves by remembering and visualizing moments in our life where we did show a high level of emotional self-composure, a high level of self-possession, where we did zip it when we needed to zip it, right? And showed greater emotional maturity. It can be very helpful in motivation and in terms of learning to remember that we don't always fail in our efforts to do these things. Very often we also succeed, and it's important to remember that. Yet we all know that self-restraint is not easy under the force and the energy of intense emotions, anger, fear, need, so on and so on. Some practical tools that can help us develop a better level of emotional restraint when we feel like that's what's needed. The first one is one that's very time-honored and you've heard many times. If you're getting emotionally triggered, emotionally activated, pause. One of the hardest things to learn because our brain is wired up in a way to pay attention to intense emotions, and it's very easy for those intense emotions to overwhelm our capability to exercise self-control. We've all experienced that many times, probably, in our lives, where the emotion seems as if it actually takes possession of us. So the first and most crucial thing is to learn to pause, to press the pause button whenever we feel our energy rising, whenever we feel that intense emotion rising, and so on. Breathing strategies can be very helpful. Take a few. One person might only need one or two, another one might need 5 or 6. take a few deep, slow breaths where you emphasize exhaling a little bit, not just inhaling. Inhaling tends to energize us, tends to bring energy in. Exhaling tends to relax us, even in terms of our chest muscles, right? And our lungs. Breathing in causes tension. Breathing out allows relaxation. Breathing out activates what's called the parasympathetic branch of our nervous system. That's the relaxation response in our body. The in breath activates the sympathetic branch, which is more likely to be energizing and even additionally activating for our feelings. So breathing deeply and slowly and emphasizing exhaling just for a few breaths can be very helpful in terms of helping us restore our composure. Walking away, even if you're in a discussion or an argument with someone you love and you feel yourself starting to spin out emotionally, walking away, it can be helpful to give the person reassurance. I just need a few minutes to, compose myself, to restore myself, to get a little more emotionally sober right now. But I will be back. That can be a very reassuring message to somebody we care about. But walking away so that we do give ourselves time to take possession of ourselves again. Practicing mindfulness can be very helpful, which you can do many times during the day. Just practicing the art of non-judgmental observation of whatever you're experiencing, your thoughts, your images, your emotions, your body sensations. In this context, we're mostly focused on emotions, right? And emotional experience. But learning to practice that kind of observing self toward ourselves, where we're able to step back and not be completely controlled and engaged by the emotion that we're having. Realizing that there are different parts to who we are. And there's one part in those moments that might be enraged or terrified or whatever. And again, depending on the situation, if we're really endangered, we may need to flee, right? But realizing that while there are parts of me that might be in a less dramatic or dangerous situation, parts of me might be very, very activated and, ready to unload on the person. But we can remind ourselves there are other parts to me, not just this part that's so energized that I'm so identifying with right now. There are a lot of other parts to me. And if it's someone we love and we're close to, there's a part of me that knows I'm furious with this person right now, and I love him or her. I care about them. And one of the biggest problems with anger and rage is what? We lose touch with context. We lose touch with the importance and the meaning of other people or our job or whatever to us, because the intensity of the emotion creates tunnel vision for us and we lose context. So these are some of the tools. There's others. Using language, learning the tool of talking about myself, using I statements rather than you this and you that, and you made me feel this and you're making me feel that. Avoiding blameful language, like you're making me feel this and it's your fault. So there are all kinds of tools, you guys, that are learnable, very learnable with what? With practice, not just hearing somebody like me talk about them, not just reading about them in a book, but I encourage my clients to take one tool a week and practice it. And I don't want to create the impression that all feelings need to be suppressed or controlled or contained. Obviously, many feelings just need to be communicated. But many of us have a lot of inhibitions to doing that. But I just want to make that point. I'm not saying that it's all about learning to suppress, and better manage or restrain our emotions. Ideally, we want to be able to constructively communicate a wide range of emotions when we need to do that and when we want to do that, and also be able to receive a wide range of emotions from others. So, connection to taking a daily inventory and emotional sobriety is, I hope, pretty clear. The more awareness we develop and a daily inventory of our emotions is a very great way of developing greater awareness, right? And then the end of the day inventory as well. The more awareness we develop, the more power we develop to change. In his book, 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety, looking at the time here, Alan described this concept this way: emotional sobriety is a mental state in which we no longer react to our changing emotions as though they are the governing facts of our lives. This mental state is made possible by the emotional and spiritual maturity that come with humility. In this state, we have an appropriate balance and coordination of all that we are. In other words, as we become more emotionally sober, more we are aware of our feelings, and we have the ability to experience them and communicate them, but we don't give them privilege to make our decisions for us and to control our words and our actions in our life. We're informed by our feelings, and they are a valued and meaningful and important part of our experience, but they don't rule our lives. This is obviously much easier said than done, oftentimes, right? Especially with feelings connected to especially painful or frightening or traumatic experiences that we've been through in our life. So, keeping a part of our awareness throughout our day focused on our better self and being rigorously honest with ourselves about how we're feeling regarding our own behavior and our own words, and learning to tell ourselves, not just to tell ourselves, okay, I'm never going to do that again. Okay, I'm never going to say that again. Okay, I'm never going to be that version of myself again. Rather, what I've found for myself and for others over the years is cultivating an attitude of curiosity rather than just making demands and, statements about how we're going to be, resolutions, right, for the future, is a much more helpful and productive way to go. And that involves experiencing the experience of what I call self-acceptance. And I'll go more into that in a minute. So let's learn as we can, day by day, to accept and face the reality of what we did say and do, experience our disappointment or shame or regret, and make amends as soon as we can regarding our wrongdoing. Admitting wrongdoing is a gift we give ourselves as well as to the other person. Acknowledging our poor behavior, acknowledging any hurt we've caused. This allows us to embrace kindness and also humility, which is the idea I want to turn to now. A huge part of growth in emotional sobriety requires a willingness to look at ourselves as honestly as we can. And that's really fostered by an attitude of humility. In humility, I'm referring to our ability to let go of our egocentrism, our excessive focus on self and self-importance, and to see ourselves more realistically. When we are humble, we are neither underestimating or overestimating our accomplishments and our capabilities and our worth, but we are also acknowledging our limitations and our imperfections, our lack of knowledge, our ignorance, in other words, and so on. In short, humility is the acceptance of reality. We're not perfect, and despite that voice that might be in our head telling us in otherwise, we don't need to be perfect. A couple other takes on humility that you might find meaningful. Merriam-Webster defines it as freedom from pride and arrogance. Alan, in his book, 12 Essential Insights, says humility creates an experience of being right-sized. I really like that expression. In humility, he says, we have a low, meaning reduced or more realistic focus on self and acknowledge our limitations, which means we surrender the idea we have the right to impose our expectations and demands on people, circumstances, or even on life itself. I also like the simplicity of another definition I ran into. Humility is an attitude of spiritual modesty, not arrogance, not grandiosity, not self-importance, spiritual modesty that comes from understanding our place in the larger order of things. For some reason, that wording resonates with me. It also involves not taking our desires, successes, or failings too seriously. Now, what do kindness and humility have to do with self-esteem? Because a few years ago, Alan and I were talking about this topic, and we came up with the idea of humility-based self-esteem. One of my mentors, a self-esteem theorist and therapist, you've heard me mention if you've heard me present before, Nathaniel Brandon, defines self-esteem as the integration of self-respect and self-confidence. It's the integration of a feeling of worthiness, of love, of happiness, of, good things coming to us in our life, as well as a feeling of confidence about, I'm able to learn the things I need to learn to deal with the requirements of life well enough, right? Never perfectly, but well enough. So the integration of of self-respect and self-confidence. Our level of self-esteem can fluctuate many times during a day, let alone over a week or years. And he also says our level of self-esteem is directly tied to our ability to be in reality, to connect to reality, especially aspects of reality we find painful and don't want to look at. That our level of self-esteem is directly tied to our willingness to confront aspects of reality we don't want to deal with. And these strategies of tracking our imperfect behavior in the course of the day, at being curious about those behaviors and where we learn them, they both support and are enhanced by attitudes of self-acceptance, which is part of self-esteem, attitudes of living more consciously. It very much helps us move in that direction, which is part of self-esteem, and an attitude of self-responsibility. If I'm acknowledging my wrongdoing to someone, I'm what? I'm taking responsibility for my part in the experience that they had. So I do want to stop now, and I appreciate your attention very much. I hope that draws some connections between step 10 and emotional sobriety and what we like to call humility-based self-esteem. So thank you all again.
I love having you back here tonight, and I miss you here.
I miss you too, Tom.
Yeah, I'm
and it's
glad.
been wonderful staying in touch with you too.
Yeah.
Really
This
great.
this is, and I got one of the things I would say. I wish Alan were here too, because it's like, you weren't hell and brimstone preaching tonight. It's like, sometimes you used to get that way, but I tell you what, Alan's gotten that way. I mean, he's testifying. It's like he's fired up. So I think you would enjoy his approach. But no, I'll just I can jump in now.
Please.
Okay. Well, I don't have nothing very organized, but what I did is I made a list and put little stars by it. So I'll just kind of bullet point the things that jumped out at me. As I appreciate everything you said. Is like, one of the first things I marked was just when you said, a couple of times you said, check on this and check with yourself, and several times a day. And what that, what I wrote after that is just there has, what I've learned in the disclaimer is this is largely what works for me, but a lot of times, many times I'm talking about stuff, I've also discovered it works for other people that I see, but it's, we need some structure in our lives. It doesn't have to be a lot. For me, it's not a good idea to put a lot in there. But I'm talking about the kind of structure that just is that more for me. As you know, this is my morning, what I call my morning meditation, which is it's not any kind of formal meditation. It's starting a day with readings, some my basic definition of meditation, which is sitting with silence and uh, doing that, and sometimes writing, but but it begins with those reminders that you were talking about. It's like the reminders of, my favorite reminder is, the serenity prayer. I don't, ch- I don't, I'm not, I don't change, I don't have control of much, but the things I do have control of, are very important. And they're all things that are within my rational choice. And if I don't remember that, even though it seems ridiculously crazy, I'm often out there trying to change other people, places, and things that I have not a chance in hell of affecting. And I'm wasting energy. I'm probably getting on their nerves. It's like it's not good for anybody. So the next thing on this, learn from success. This is an issue I was talking to a client today about. Is you know and I've probably said that here. It's like we learn from how we screw things up, and thank God we have a lot of material. And I mean, I don't think anybody in this whole group would disagree with that. But we need to be able. Well, part of what we have to learn to do is recognize our success. And I think the 10th step is a wonderful opportunity to do that because we are actively being humble. We're working with our humility by acknowledging these things up front. So I always remind people, learn from your success, and then I'll, maybe a couple more, but this one I'll just say. I love, you talked about exhaling, inhaling, and that kind of stuff. One of the things I've noticed when I work with people with breathing exercises and learned it for years and years ago is we breathe like we live as codependents, I think. It's like we take a lot in, but we don't let it all out. And it's like I am always amazed and like to point out when I'm leading some breath exercises, like to point out that when you think your exhale is over, push more. It's like it's amazing how much more air is in there, and it's like it really makes a difference, and it really is a relaxing experience. And the last thing I say, I don't know if this is something that fits into what you said, but it was something I was working with a client today which was basically, and it's about humility, which is we're not here on earth. I don't know I don't know what the meaning of life is and how it works from there, but I'm pretty sure we're not here on earth to see how well other people can treat us. But it's about how we can respond, even if they're treating us in a way that does not feel respectful or kind. How do I respond to that? And it's like that's goes back to the very beginning. What you're talking about is integrity. One day at a time, we're doing that. And to me, step 10 is just totally essential to the maintenance of my integrity. So, amen.
Amen.
There's
Thank you.
potash.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had some technical difficulties, and so I had to restart a little bit.
I wish all
And
my difficulties in life were technical difficulties, Tom. I wish they were. Yeah.
well, then it goes from being a technical difficulty to being an emotional difficulty.
Well, that very quickly for me.
I was lucky enough to get the whole package, Roger, before I dropped out. And a couple of things which I wanted to key on that you mentioned. One was you used the term motivation, and you talked about motivation a little bit. In the 12 and 12, he says, aren't these practices joy killers as well as time consumers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say that it will, if I do this work, it'll make the hours of my day better and happier. And it talks about the relationship improvement that happens
Mm.
as well. Um, and the motivation for me, and I could see the progress that's happened along the way, is when I would go to sleep, well, not go to sleep, when I would put my head down on the pillow at night, my mind would race about all
Yeah.
the things I either did or thought I did incorrectly. You used the term mistakes, right? Like, and try not to, evoke shame in its own right just by, blaming. But I would replay those things. And um, the motivation was to go to sleep a little bit quicker and easier. And if I was making those amends and making those course corrections and being more restrained in my response, I had less that to keep me up at night.
That's a great example of a situational motivation, right? Some of them are very specific. Yeah.
Yeah. And, thankfully, most nights I can go right to sleep. I'll do a quick 10-step inventory in my head. Like, do I need to fix something tomorrow? And, could I, there's always a little room for improvement, but um, that, uh, monkey mind and that kind of reliving the moments over and over again have left me for the most part, thankfully, and I attribute it in a way to mindfulness. You brought that up. I took several mindfulness training courses on in the John Kabat-Zinn
Hmm.
um,
Full
uh,
catastrophe living. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But some instructors who learned directly from him, and slowing down. Like it's taken again practice, practice, practice. Slowing down, mostly so I don't cause the harm, but also to do the feedback loop, right? To see what's going on in front of me and what my reaction is, and to hold off before speaking. And I did the overregulation. You mentioned that, like, the kind of like, okay, let me just, if the machine is producing,
Yeah. Yeah.
bad results, and talked about technology again. If my output is crap, maybe I should just shut it down. But then I'm not present and feeling, and it's participating in my life. I'm just,
When in doubt, reboot.
yeah, exactly. But I would just like go into sleep mode and just cut this thing off because it was producing bad results. And it wasn't a way to live either. And I had to find that kind of range that you talk about. And and finally, you talked about language, right? And being more skillful in my language. And two things which benefited me for that is one is that when I admit I'm in anxiety and I'm in fear, and this mostly happens with my wife, right? The closest relationship is the hardest relationship for me, and I can say, I'm anxious, and to just be honest about the fear that's
Yeah.
underneath that, right? And if I can get to those words and express that, I know it's triggering the reaction when I speak quickly and more loudly,
Right.
and try to override the conversation, and just being able to recognize that if possible and bring that there, and then to learn better words, right? To be more precise in my feelings and what the thinking is behind them. To hopefully, even if I'm not, if even if I'm trying to explain bad behavior or explain a bad reaction, at least I'm being transparent about what brought me to that. Like, even if I'm mistaken, right? And that at least to kind of understand where that is. And finally, you used the word daily devotion, right? And just going back to the practice idea, devotion means love, right? So
Mhm.
if I want to love this life and my experience in it, approach it like that, that it's not a punishment. This is about being more, present and better in my relationships.
Wow. Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
You did a good job of listening since you were
Yeah.
working on technical
Yeah, I was
problems.
going to say your technical problems sure didn't affect your memory.
Really?
No,
No, I'm thank you, both of you guys. Um, yeah. Anything else that Tom Rutledge, anything you heard Tom say that activated anything for you?
Well, I don't usually have a lot to say. It's I don't know.
Okay.
I love
Well,
having you here, Roger. I really am. And part of it is I just am filled with some joy of just seeing you back on the screen. I just love it.
yeah, because we've
And
communicated.
you're not making it easier for any of us because after you're gone, everybody's gonna be bitching at us about getting you. Why can't he? He came once. Why the hell can't you get
Yeah.
him back
Well,
again? Because he
I
doesn't
may,
like
it's
us
just
very much.
my I might seem energetic tonight. I am feeling it because I really do enjoy being here with everyone here, right? All the participants with you guys. But my energy level is still fairly limited
It's
compared
still
to
at the
what,
end of the day. No,
yeah,
I understand that.
and
It's
so
like
I need to devote my energy primarily to my private clients and to the Gestalt training thing that Alan and I do together. But I got to tell you, this has been a real treat for me. So
well, I
thank
want you
you.
to know you haven't stopped being special to this group, even though you haven't been here.
I want to thank everyone. I've read the messages. Thank you so much. It's very touching to me to feel so welcomed. Um,
Mhm.
and appreciated. So thank you very,
Yeah,
very
I
much
think the
for
word
your
is loved.
for your messages.
Yeah.